Today we're going to be discussing Daniel chapter 9, known as the 70 weeks prophecy. I recently did a video about the rapture and when it will occur. The timing of the rapture will fit perfectly into the 70 weeks prophecy and the tribulation. This 70 weeks prophecy is the elemental structure as it defines the tribulation itself. This will be the most important video I've made. I've seen so many people get this prophecy wrong, and with it, their understanding of the tribulation. This could be a serious or even fatal problem for many, as I will explain in the video. I will challenge all who will hear things they don't agree with to watch the whole video to decide if this video speaks the truth. I'll compare my interpretation and show you why I differ from others who teach on the tribulation and how their teaching could lead many into danger. And I don't think I'm being hyperbolic either. Other people's interpretation of this prophecy is going to lead many straight into the strong delusion that the Apostle Paul spoke about. Okay, that's enough prep for the importance of the 70 weeks prophecy.
Let's go to the book of Daniel, chapter 9, and read it. 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublesome times. And after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end of it shall be with a flood. Until the end of the war, desolations are determined. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abomination shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation, which is determined, is poured out on the desolate. Most Bible-reading Christians know about this prophecy, but the purpose of this prophecy in verse 24 needs to be repeated. 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Now, some teachers will say that this prophecy is about the Jewish people, since the angel is addressing Daniel with this phrase, 70 weeks are determined for your people.
Now, Daniel was a Jewish person, but remember, Israel had already broken the covenant with God, which is mentioned during the time of Jeremiah. So I don't think this prophecy is solely about the Jewish people. This prophecy speaks of a new covenant with many. There's going to be a second group of God's people, Christians, which come out of the first group of God's people, the Israelite people. The Apostle Paul helps develop this idea of Christians being grafted onto the olive tree of God that was planted in Israel. God can still keep his promise to Abraham and Daniel of blessing the whole world through Christianity. I know I'm already starting to say things which might bother some people who think they know what this prophecy is about. But bear with me. I'll support this more as I go along. So even though God had said he was going to rebuild Jerusalem in Daniel 9, God had already started to make plans to send his son, Jesus, to start a new covenant by the time of the exile. And you'll see our Lord Jesus Christ in this prophecy.
And we know this prophecy refers to all of us because of these references: to make an end of sins, reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness. That's the end of times, when the glorious kingdom of Jesus Christ has come. Our Lord is coming. Maranatha. But let's break down the 70 weeks prophecy. Verse 24 clearly states that there are 70 weeks total. We'll put a line chart down here. Then here in verse 25, it breaks up the 70 weeks as follows. There shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. And in verse 27, it completes the prophecy with this: then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. Okay, so we have 70 weeks total, then segments of 7 weeks and 62 weeks for the first 69 weeks, and then a last week to make 70 weeks total. Pretty straightforward. All people have this basic structure down. We know verse 24 is the purpose of the prophecy, so we need to go to verse 25 in order to start understanding the breaking down of the prophecy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublesome times. The entire book of Daniel is set with the Jewish people being in exile. The people had sinned against God, been unfaithful to him by worshiping other gods, and had lost their promised land. Again, they'd broken the covenant with God. This is the context as to where the Jewish people were when this prophecy was given to Daniel. So God promises through this prophecy that he was going to restore and build Jerusalem, the street would be built again, and even the wall around the city. And all this was pointing to one person, until Messiah the Prince. I would say all Christians believe that Jesus is this person referred to as Messiah the Prince. I agree with this, that Jesus Christ is the Messiah that was prophesied right here in Daniel 9:25. But let's go a step further. Here in verse 25 it says, "Until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks." This means that Jesus Christ comes after the 7 weeks and the 62 weeks. Let's put Jesus here in our line chart after both the first two segments totaling 69 weeks are fulfilled. Before we get to the last week of the prophecy, I think most Christians are with me at this point in understanding the prophecy. So this is the structure of the prophecy by verse 25. Now from here is where I will diverge from most others on the understanding of this prophecy. This is going to be very important, so let's reread verses 25 and 26 together to fully understand the context of these two verses. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublesome times. And after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end of it shall be with a flood. Until the end of the war, desolations are determined. We know at this point that the first 69 weeks mark something significant in the life of Jesus Christ. I know what others say it is, but hear me out. In verse 26 here, lots of people think that this line about the Messiah being cut off is also referring to Jesus Christ, as he is the Messiah to all of us Christians, and he was cut off by his death, not for himself. But this is where I stand apart from others. I do not think that this line in verse 26 is referring to Jesus Christ, and I'm going to explain why. First, verse 26 refers to Messiah, but this line in verse 25 refers to Messiah the Prince. A prince is the son of a king, so it fits that Jesus, the Son of God, would be referred to as a prince. But verse 26 only refers to this person as Messiah. It might not mean anything, or it might mean something big, but let's keep going. We need to drop the rest of the lines to examine the Hebrew words used. In verses 25 and 26, they both use the same Hebrew word, Mashiach. We don't have to go over the letters, since you can see every letter is the same in both verses. It's the same word. Now that Hebrew word can be translated as Messiah, but it can also be translated as an anointed one. The Messiah would be anointed, but here's the thing. Other people could be anointed as well. Priests, prophets, and kings can also be anointed. So as we come back to the Daniel 9 verses, that opens up the potential of verse 26 to be referring to someone else. There's a general rule for translating scripture from one language into another, and that's context. Just because the same Hebrew word is used in verses 25 and 26 doesn't mean they both translate the same way, or better yet, refer to the same person. And here's the key context of the prophecy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem. That's the starting point of the prophecy, when the command to restore and build Jerusalem was issued. We'll drop out verse 26 down here to bring in our line chart of what we know at this point. Now let's place the trigger point. The prophecy starts to count when the command to restore and build Jerusalem was issued.
Now there's a lot of controversy here. Some people have this command at a later point from some other person than I do in order to make their timeline fit. And it's going to lead them into misunderstanding the starting point of the prophecy and glance over the segments of the prophecy. Some teachers don't even address the different segments of 7 weeks and 62 weeks. They just combine them into 69 weeks in order to make their timelines fit. If the prophecy wanted you to just plug in 69 weeks in a timeline, then it would have been written as 69 weeks with a final week. But the prophecy is written with segments of 7 weeks and 62 weeks, so they have to have meaning. I'll go over every segment of this prophecy, connect them with its meaning to show how everything fits and why the prophecy was structured with these different segments. The specific command that the prophecy is speaking about is knowable. There are multiple versions of different commands to rebuild Jerusalem along the way, so you should probably start with the first command that was issued. And the 70 weeks prophecy itself will confirm this is the command that starts it. Biblical scholars know the person who issued the first command to rebuild, and that person was Cyrus the Great.
And we can find this command written about in Ezra 1. Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and also put it in writing, saying, Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth the Lord God of heaven has given me, and he has commanded me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. In the first year of Cyrus, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, who had overthrown the kingdom of Babylon, and now has control over all the kingdoms, and with it, God's people. Then Cyrus issues the command to rebuild God's house, or what we know as the Second Temple. This is the first command. Let's configure this slide with the Ezra command down here to make room for something. Over 150 years before Ezra's command, God inspired Isaiah to prophesy this, who says of Cyrus, He is my shepherd, and he shall perform all my pleasure, saying to Jerusalem, You shall be built, and to the temple, your foundation shall be laid. So God being God would know the future and how he would use a Persian king Cyrus to issue a command to rebuild the temple and Jerusalem. So if you combine Isaiah 44 with Ezra 1, this is the command that Daniel 9 is talking about. Cyrus issued this command in Daniel 9:25. But we can go deeper with this and confirm this is the truth. If you keep reading Isaiah, the next chapter 45 is still talking about Cyrus. Thus says the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have held, to subdue the nations before him, and loose the armor of kings, to open before him the double doors, so that the gates will not be shut. Did you catch that? The Lord says to his anointed, to Cyrus. That root word used here for anointed is the same Hebrew word used in Daniel 9, verse 26, that was translated as Messiah. So you see that Hebrew word can be translated as anointed. And we just read the book of Ezra saying that God stirred up the spirit of Cyrus. This means that Cyrus was anointed by God to issue this command. Remember, I said prophets could be considered anointed as well. Now let's bring back verse 26 in Daniel 9. What if this word that is commonly translated as Messiah, which is the same word used in Isaiah 45, is actually supposed to be referring to an anointed man by God? I know this is challenging for some, but let's keep going. Let's wipe away the Isaiah verse to bring back Daniel 9:25. Remember, verse 25 and the starting point of the prophecy is about the command to restore and build Jerusalem. So let's just try it out and retranslate verse 26 this way. And after the 62 weeks, the anointed one shall be cut off, but not for himself. What if verse 26, knowing the context of verse 25 about the command to restore and build Jerusalem, is referring to Cyrus here, who was anointed by God and issued the command to restore Jerusalem?
This understanding is going to change everything from other teachers who might get the length of the tribulation wrong. This might be hard for some of you to accept since I'm going after another mistranslation in the Bible. But let this play out and at least watch until the end of this video before deciding if I'm right or wrong. I'm plainly stating that Daniel 9 verse 26 is about the anointed man Cyrus and not Jesus Christ. That may be hugely controversial, but I'll support this in other ways too. If you studied the Bible yourself or have seen any of my videos, you know that God leaves clues in the scriptures in order to figure things out. The book of Daniel has a really important detail at the beginning of most chapters.
In chapter 9 about the 70 weeks prophecy, this detail is in the first verse. In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of the lineage of the Medes, who was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans. In our video about the first beast of Revelation, we broke down most of this Daniel 9 prophecy, and in that video, we also showed you how the Daniel 2 statue was fulfilled. This statue representing kingdoms starting from the time of Babylon and moving on from there. The book of Daniel explicitly identifies the first three kingdoms on the statue. The head of gold was Babylon. The chest was the combined kingdoms of the Medes and Persians, and the belly element was the kingdom of Greece. Then in the first beast video, I went on to show you how Rome and the United States would fulfill the last two elements on the statue. To zero in on and support the second kingdom on the chest of the statue, the book of Daniel clearly identifies Babylon as the head. Then here in Daniel 5, at the end of the Babylonian kingdom, it says this: "Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians." So it's very clear from the book of Daniel that after Babylon, the kingdom of the Medes and Persians is the next element on the statue in Daniel 2. And since the next element on the statue was an alliance kingdom of the Medes and Persians, that means when Darius the Mede took control over Babylon in his first year, that would be the same time when Cyrus the Persian took over as king too. And if we slide in Ezra 1, we see God stirred up the spirit of Cyrus to issue the command in his first year, that same first year as Darius the Mede in the beginning of Daniel 9. Let's get rid of the Daniel 2 statue and reconfigure the slide to show the connection of Daniel 9 and Ezra 1 happening at the same time. Now let's bring in Daniel 9 verse 25 again that starts the prophecy. "Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem." So even though Daniel chapter 9 happens in the same year as Cyrus issuing the command to restore Jerusalem in Ezra 1, how can we confirm this is the command the prophecy is talking about? Because Daniel chapter 9 tells you exactly that. "At the beginning of your supplications, the command went out." The beginning of Daniel's supplications happened in the beginning of chapter 9, in the first year of Darius the Mede. That's when the command went out. This is talking about the command in the first year of Cyrus in Ezra 1. This confirms that the command to rebuild in this prophecy comes from Cyrus and not someone else at a later date. This is a key point that other teachers just overlook because they want to show how their math works out a different way. The line in Daniel 9:23 is the key and shows they're in error. Now let's get rid of verse 25 so we can bring in our line chart. We can now show definitively that the command to trigger the prophecy comes from Cyrus and not anyone else. There's so much more to reveal on this line chart, so we'll keep going. We've established that Darius's first year and Cyrus's first year were at the same time. Most of the other chapters in Daniel also include when the stories and prophecies happen. And if we're zeroing in on the time frame of the beginning of the Media-Persian kingdom, then we just need to look at Daniel 5 again. That chapter deals with the end of the Babylonian kingdom. And here comes another key detail after the death of Babylon's king. This will be rather big. That very night, Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, was slain, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. Can you see what is important about that? Let me spell it out for you. All of these things happened at the same time. Darius the Mede takes over Babylon, and Daniel chapter 9 happens in Darius's first year. The Medes and the Persians were allied together under the rule of Cyrus the Great. And in Ezra 1, Cyrus issues a command to rebuild in his first year, the same year that Darius took control over Babylon. I said that Daniel 9 happened at the same time, so the 70 weeks prophecy happens at the same time that Cyrus issues the command to rebuild. The prophecy starts to count when the command to rebuild is issued, and the angel Gabriel confirms the command in the prophecy came from Cyrus in Daniel 9:23. And we also found out that when Darius took control over Babylon, he was 62 years old. Do you think it's a coincidence that when Darius takes over Babylon in his first year that he's 62 years old, at the same time when the 70 weeks prophecy is given to Daniel, which includes a segment of the prophecy being 62 weeks? I don't think those same numbers being used are a coincidence. Not at all.
The only reason to mention Darius being 62 years old is for you to connect it to the 62 weeks in the prophecy. happening at the same time. God leaves these clues behind so to connect these things together. And if you can buy this connection is coming from God, then what do you think he is saying about all these things happening at the same time with the connection to the number 62? I'll show you what I think it means and how to unlock the 70 weeks prophecy in Daniel 9.
But first, let's review the main part of the prophecy again, verses 25 and 26. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem, we know this command was issued by Cyrus in Ezra 1, in the first year of his kingdom, the same year the 70 weeks prophecy was given to Daniel. The angel Gabriel confirmed this in Daniel 9:23. Okay, we'll move on. Until Messiah the Prince. I and most Christian scholars agree that Messiah the Prince here in verse 25 is fulfilled by Jesus Christ. And the next line is connected to him. There shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. We mentioned that this indicates that Jesus Christ comes after both the segments of 7 weeks and 62 weeks are completed. Now let's go on to a key part. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublesome times. And after the 62 weeks, the anointed one shall be cut off, but not for himself. We'll get back to the last 4 lines in a bit. I've already put forward that verse 26 here is often translated wrong, and is actually referring to the anointed one Cyrus, who was anointed by God and issued the command to restore Jerusalem that triggered the prophecy itself. But this verse 26 also connects the anointed one being cut off with the timing of the 62 weeks. Let's just go ahead and wipe away the last 4 lines to make room for our line chart and what we know so far. I think most will be with me at this point, especially since I think I've established that the command that starts the prophecy comes from Cyrus in Ezra 1. We've also established that when Darius the Mede takes over Babylon, it was at the same time as Cyrus's command. We then found out that when Darius takes over Babylon, he was 62 years old. Now look at the prophecy line chart and what we know at this point. And let's re-highlight the 5th line in verse 25. There shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Now most people take this at face value in the order it was written. But what if the connection to the number 62 happening in the same year, both the 62 weeks of this prophecy and Darius being 62 years old, means the 62 weeks are supposed to come first? Oh, there's no other reason to mention Darius's age in the book of Daniel, except for this very reason. So let's reconfigure the line chart and put the 62 weeks first. Well, that's certainly different. If the prophecy fulfillment is structured this way, then Darius's age being 62 years old is connected to the 62 weeks of the prophecy, which happens at the same time. And in addition, this also happens at the same time that Cyrus issues the command to restore Jerusalem, which starts the prophecy itself. This connects all these things together. This structure will also fulfill verse 25 that our Messiah, Jesus Christ, comes after both segments, the 62 weeks and the 7 weeks are completed. They're just in reverse order. And then, if we come back to verse 26 and the anointed one being cut off after the 62 weeks, that also reinforces that Cyrus was the anointed one that was cut off. This will make more sense when we pinpoint the date and talk about the rest of the verse.
I know this has to be challenging for some of you. Why would God give a prophecy to Daniel, listed with segments of 7 weeks and 62 weeks, only to fulfill them in reverse order? You have to understand a general point of view of God. Jesus spoke in parables in order to disguise the truth from people that weren't open to him. Most often the Pharisees were the people that Jesus intended to confuse by his teachings. Now add that knowledge to the prophecies in Daniel that talks about sealing up the understanding of prophecies until the time of the end. It says that knowledge will increase in the end. And match the understanding of all that with the book of Revelation, saying the mystery of God will be revealed before the end comes. So writing the segments of the 70 weeks prophecy in reverse order of how they are fulfilled would be how God would disguise the truth until the very end. I hope you can accept that, or at least allow it as a possibility. Everything will be connected as you watch this video until the end.
Now come back to the starting point of the prophecy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem, We took this command by Cyrus, which also happened at the same time that Darius the Mede was 62 years old, to mean that the 62 weeks comes first. Then in order to figure out the prophecy, you just have to figure out when this command by Cyrus was issued in history. Now it's hard to pinpoint exact dates in the early Bible, but as we get closer to the time of Jesus and the modern calendar, historical records become more exact. We know when the Babylonian kingdom was overthrown by Cyrus and the Persian kingdom. That happened in the year 539 BC. But before we start breaking down the prophecy, we have to understand how to fulfill the prophecy. We're not ready to break down verse 27 and the last week of the prophecy, but there's a clue there to understand the rest of the prophecy. Let's look at verse 27. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. Now on this channel, we believe verse 27 is referring to Jesus Christ, not verse 26, since Jesus Christ would be the person to confirm the new covenant with many. And his sacrificial death brought an end to sacrifice and offering. Every single Christian believes that the sacrifice of Jesus Christ did exactly that. We'll go deeper with this last week later in the video and explain the differences between this interpretation and others, and why the other popular interpretation could lead many astray. But the general overview of the last week of the prophecy states that he brought that end to the sacrifice in the middle of the week. Here are the basics. We know that last week has 7 days, so the middle of the week would be right there in the middle of the 4th day, with both 3.5 days before the middle and 3.5 days after the middle. That 3.5 time period will be the key to connecting the last half week to the end times. But that will come later, when we tell why that 3.5 time period is very meaningful. So if the first half week of the final week in verse 27 is referring to Jesus Christ, then we have to show a connection to his life or ministry. In the Gospel of John, there are marking points in his telling of the story of Jesus, and there are the 3 Passovers. I would say the majority of scholars think that Jesus' ministry lasted 3 years, but his ministry didn't officially start until he was baptized by John the Baptist. Most scholars think that Jesus was baptized in the fall around September to October. So let's plot it out, and for this it doesn't matter if you think his ministry started in the year 27 AD or 30 AD. I think it started in the year 30 AD, but I'll do both. If John baptized Jesus in the fall of year 27 or 30 AD, then this is when his ministry began. Then the first Passover would be the next year. Then the second Passover would be the next. And finally, the third Passover would either be in the year 30 or 33 AD when he died. If you're counting the actual time from the marking point of John's baptism of Jesus until his death, the total time would be closer to 2.5 years. But that's not how prophecy fulfillment works. If you count the years that are involved, either 27 through 30, or my preferred dates of 30 through 33, you would have 4 different years involved. But because they aren't full years, this would be symbolically fulfilled by 3.5 years. Which brings us back to the final week of the 70 weeks prophecy. We know the final week was split in half, with 3.5 days marking the first half week and 3.5 days marking the last half week. On this channel, we are saying that Jesus' ministry fulfilled the first half week and is the person to confirm the covenant in verse 27. I will further support the view that Cyrus is the anointed person in verse 26, and it was Jesus who fulfilled verse 27. But this part of the video is to show you that the first half week of 3.5 days was fulfilled by the 3.5 years in the ministry of Jesus Christ. Days are being exchanged for years to fulfill the prophecy. This methodology is how we are going to figure out the segments of 7 weeks and 62 weeks in the prophecy. Let's come back to our line chart to see where we're at. I've already said that the Bible is indicating that 62 weeks comes first, so we'll start with the 62 weeks fulfillment. We take those 62 weeks, and we know that a week has 7 days in it. So we just have to take 62 and multiply times 7, and you get 434 total days. But remember, years are being exchanged for days in the last week, so we'll do it here too. The 434 becomes years in order to figure out this part of the prophecy. Then we know from the prophecy that the starting point was the command to restore Jerusalem. We've stated that the command from Cyrus happened in the year 539 BC. So if we take the date 539, subtract those 434 years since we are in BC, and you get 105 BC. Now that date meant nothing to me at first, but I had to keep digging. Let's put that date on our line chart to complete the 62 weeks. I found that there are historians that place this date 105 BC as the year the Roman Republic fell. Oh, that sounds significant. Now, not every historian agrees on the official end to the Roman Republic, but 105 BC being a significant date will become more clear in the context of Rome. We talked about this in our first beast video. Rome is having internal problems in their republic, so in 105 BC they gave the title of consul to a Roman general by the name of Marius. Now the title of consul was the highest position anyone could attain in Rome at the time. In fact, this Marius was named consul 7 times. He was that popular of a leader for the country to lean on as the republic had problems. This time in 105 BC was the second time Marius became consul.
Okay, if this was such an important position, and Marius was named consul 7 times, why would the second time in 105 BC be so important to God for it to fulfill one part of the Daniel 9 prophecy? Now, you just have to look into what Marius did when he became consul that second time.
He made lots of reforms, and as a general, his focus would of course be on the military. And one of the reforms he made while consul this second time was to eliminate all the multiple standards of the army, to coalesce under one symbol. And guess what that symbol was? The military would now only be led by the symbol of the eagle. Now, if you watch the first beast video, that's huge. The eagle becoming the symbol of the Roman military begins the reign of the fourth living creature listed in Revelation 4, which is connected to the fourth horseman of the apocalypse in Revelation 6. That fourth horseman is the one on the pale green horse, and his rider is named Death and brings death to the world, connected to the symbol of the eagle. You're going to have to watch that first beast video to see how all that connects, including Revelation 13. We went over all 4 of the living creatures in that video. We won't have to rehash all of them here, but just know that all 4 living creatures had power over or were raised above God's people. And the fact that Rome began its sole use of the eagle symbol after 105 BC means that marks the official start of the 4th living creature as we move towards the calendar changing in year 1 AD. And when General Marius made the Roman eagle the standard of the military, then every time the army would go into battle, the eagle would lead the way. So when the Roman general Pompey conquered Jerusalem in 63 BC, then the eagle would have symbolic control over God's people. That's it. This makes the fulfillment of the first part from the prophecy huge. Up until 105 BC, Rome was a republic with multiple animal standards. But when Marius takes control and makes the eagle the official symbol, that begins the reign of the 4th living creature, which then goes on to have power over God's people.
Do you think this is too thin? The eagle symbol couldn't possibly be a fulfillment of God's prophecy. Then you have to understand the context of the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel is full of symbolisms of kingdoms. Chapter 2 uses the elements on a statue to represent kingdoms. Chapter 3 uses a gold image to represent Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom. Chapter 4 is about Nebuchadnezzar and the blinding pride over his kingdom. Chapter 5 shows how Belshazzar uses sacred vessels to drink wine and loses his kingdom. Then both chapters 7 and 8 use the imagery of animals to symbolically represent kingdoms. So naturally it fits into the context of the book of Daniel for God to use the image of an animal, the eagle, to fulfill the 70 weeks prophecy in chapter 9. This context not only fits Daniel, but also connects to the book of Revelation and its living creatures.
We'll now also show how the eagle symbol fits into the verses of the 70 weeks prophecy. And after the 62 weeks, the anointed one shall be cut off, but not for himself. I've already put forward that verse 26 here is referring to the anointed one Cyrus, who was anointed by God and issued the command to restore Jerusalem that started the prophecy with 62 weeks. So when the anointed one is cut off after the 62 weeks, and the people of the prince who is to come, the people to come were the Roman people, and the 62 weeks were fulfilled in 105 BC when the eagle was made the standard of the Roman army. So when Jerusalem was conquered by Rome in 63 BC, the eagle would rule over God's people. Even the time of Jesus' ministry around 30 AD, he was living under the rule of Rome and its eagle symbol. And we all know this is the true fulfillment of the prophecy because this was leading up to this next line. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. That did in fact happen by the Roman army, who did destroy the city of Jerusalem, and with it the temple of God. And when Rome destroyed the temple in 70 AD, of course their army would have been led by the eagle. Bingo, these things become clear only when the truth makes everything clear. And here's an interesting side note. From the first segment of this prophecy being fulfilled in 105 BC until Rome destroying the sanctuary in 70 AD, it was 175 years total. That time frame matches the lifetime of Abraham, who also lived 175 years before he died too. God even uses lifespan parallels to give us deeper meanings. So the beginning of God's chosen people started with Abraham's lifespan of 175 years and also ended from the time of the eagle becoming the symbol of the people to come and ended 175 years later when the eagle destroyed the temple. Perfect bookends to the beginning and end to God's people. We'll add more to this Abraham connection later.
We have lots more to discuss. That's only the first segment of the prophecy. And since the 62 weeks came first, then we have to get to the second part of the prophecy, or the 7 weeks.
Let's go to a new slide and use the same calculations as the 62 weeks. We start with the 7 weeks. There are 7 days to a week. We multiply the 7 days times the 7 weeks and get 49 days. Again, this prophecy converts days into years, so the 49 days becomes 49 years. Now at this point, we have to work backwards. What I mean by that is the first 69 weeks of the first 2 segments ends at this point. Until Messiah the Prince, there should be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. We've already established nearly all Christian scholars agree this Messiah in verse 25 refers to Jesus Christ. So both the first 2 segments of the prophecy must end on a point in the life of Jesus. We just have to find a significant period of 49 years that ends with Jesus Christ. There's controversy though. Some people think his ministry started in 27 AD, while others think it started in 30 AD. I think it's 30 AD, and I'm about to give you support for that view. If we say that Jesus was baptized by John in the fall of 30 AD, then working backwards, subtract those 49 years from that date, it gets you to the year 19 BC. And 19 BC is a very significant date. That was the year when King Herod refurbished the temple and placed an eagle over the temple of God. Oh, there's that eagle again. Yes, King Herod, in order to stay in the good graces of Rome, placed an eagle over the temple of God. And that was the beginning of the 7-week segment to the prophecy that led us to Jesus Christ and the start of his ministry. Now there's an elephant in the room. That gap between 105 BC and the 19 BC fulfillment parts. Remember, I said if God wanted you to use 69 weeks straight, he would have issued the prophecy as 69 weeks. But he used segments of 62 weeks and 7 weeks for a reason, as they marked very specific points of time. And later in this video, we will address the gaps in this fulfillment and why they are there. They do have meaning. Let's go over this prophecy timeline as we know it so far. The first segment of the prophecy is the 62 weeks, which starts at the command by Cyrus to restore Jerusalem in 539 BC. The 62 weeks ends in 434 years at 105 BC, when General Marius is elected consul of Rome and makes the eagle the official standard of the Roman army. This is the beginning of the 4th living creature, the eagle, and its reign over God's people, which is an important context to grasp because when the Roman general Pompey conquers Jerusalem in 63 BC, the Roman army would be led by the eagle. So from 63 BC on, the Jewish people, God's people, would now symbolically be under the control of the eagle. This is how the first segment of the 62 weeks is fulfilled. Then the 7 weeks begins in 19 BC when King Herod refurbishes the temple and places an eagle over the house of God. First, the eagle becomes the standard, then God's people are under the control of the eagle, and the eagle is placed over the temple of God. Finally, the 7 weeks are fulfilled as 49 years, and those 49 years ends with the beginning of Jesus Christ's ministry in 30 AD. And that is how the 7 weeks of the prophecy are fulfilled. And since we've placed the beginning of the ministry of Jesus Christ here to begin the final week when Rome and its eagle had control over God's people, then 3.5 years later in 33 AD, when Jesus was put to death, Roman soldiers were the instrument to kill him. That means the eagle would also be the symbol that killed Jesus Christ. And the death of Jesus would not be the end of the eagle over God and his people. After Nero's persecutions of Christians in the 7th decade AD, there was a Jewish revolt, and this revolt was put down by Roman general Titus, who would destroy the temple of God in 70 AD. And once again, any Roman army would be led by the eagle, which fulfills the eagle destroying the temple of God. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Rome certainly did. Rome and its eagle symbol was the fulfillment in every segment of the Daniel 9 70 weeks prophecy. And like I said, we'll discuss the gaps later. And there's a wonderful story in here about the Roman eagle. In Latin, the word eagle is aquila. So the Roman eagle was often called the aquila. And you're going to find out names are a thing with God. The Apostle Paul becomes an important figure in the New Testament and the beginning of God's new church. In the book of Acts, we meet one of Paul's friends who had to flee Rome. His name was Aquila. Oh, cool. That was probably a common name at the time, right? But wait until you hear the context, though. In a letter to the Corinthians, Paul also mentions this same man, and this time he says that Aquila hosted a church in his house. The temple of God's first chosen people was destroyed under the symbol of the Aquila. Then God uses a man named Aquila to start his new church. Perfect symmetry. And this helps you to see the significance of names and also the importance of the eagle symbol.
And this series of events under the eagle symbol fits into Revelation 2. As the Jewish people were the first witness of God, their temple in the end is destroyed under that eagle, which fulfilled Revelation 11 about the story of the two witnesses being overcome. We went over all of this in a rapture video. And all of Revelation 11 will also be fulfilled through God's second witness, Christians. You should watch this first beast video to see how the eagle plays a role in God's second witness too.
But now that we've done the first 69 weeks to get to Jesus Christ, we just have to discuss the last week of the prophecy more thoroughly. This is what separates my teaching from others. Let's reread verse 27, which talks about the last week. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abomination shall be the one who makes desolate, even until the consummation, which is determined, is poured out on the desolate. Once we understand verse 26 is referring to Cyrus, then the first line in verse 27 is clearly speaking about Jesus Christ confirming the new covenant with many for 1 week. Yep, this will bring it home. Likewise, he also took the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is shed for you." This is what the 70 weeks prophecy is all about. This is the new covenant with God through his Son, Jesus Christ. By the time of the exile of the Israelites, the covenant between them and God was broken. This is why this prophecy is so important. As Christians, it's our new covenant with God through our Redeemer, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Now let's keep going. But in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. The book of Hebrews addresses the last and ultimate sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Therefore, when he came into the world, he said, "Sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but a body you have prepared for me." Previously saying, "Sacrifice and offering, burnt offerings and offerings for sin, you did not desire, nor had pleasure in them, which are offered according to the law." Then he said, "Behold, I have come to do your will, O God." He takes away the first, that he may establish the second. By that, we will have been sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ, once for all. Now, all Christians believe that Jesus' death was the end of all animal sacrifices. There's no need to make any more sacrifices for the sins of mankind. Jesus accomplished that once for all with his sacrificial death. So here in Daniel 9:27, the death of Jesus Christ was the death that brought an end to sacrifice and offering. Before we get back to the last three depressing lines in verse 27, let's emphasize the final week with our line chart of the 70 weeks prophecy. We know verse 27 is about the last week and the confirmation of the new covenant. And since this channel has said that Jesus is the one to confirm the new covenant with many, then the middle of the week, when the end to sacrifice and offering occurred, was the death of Jesus Christ. That 3.5-day time period in the prophecy represents the 3.5 years in the ministry of Jesus Christ, from his baptism by John the Baptist in the fall of 30 AD until his death at Passover in 33 AD. So that leaves the last half week of this prophecy to be fulfilled. The last 3.5 days of the 70 weeks prophecy is still to happen. We know this isn't fulfilled because at the beginning of this prophecy, it says the prophecy will bring an end of sins, reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness. That hasn't happened yet. We still live in a very sinful world. So this last 3.5 days of the prophecy still has to happen. And since the ministry of Jesus Christ symbolically lasted 3.5 years, that means the last half week will also be measured as the same length of time, 3.5 years. This is going to be what is known as the tribulation. Yes, the tribulation will only be 3.5 years. There will not be a 7-year time period. And I will compare my interpretation of this prophecy with others later and why it's so critical. And also, as promised, I'll discuss this 2,000-year gap in addition to the other gaps of time in this fulfillment. Wait until you hear it. It will make perfect sense to you, straight from the gospel of Jesus Christ. Let's discuss the context of the last half week. The 3.5-year tribulation will be a very bad time period. Let's just read the end to this prophecy. And on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate. The wing of abominations, like the wing of an eagle, right? Remember how the eagle was fulfilling all the segments of this prophecy. Even until the consummation, which is determined, is poured out on the desolate. The consummation of the covenant is poured out on the desolate? Whoa, that sounds horrible and bleak. But God has been hinting about this dark time to come. We did this video about the Daniel 12 prophecy. That prophecy also talked about the coming tribulation. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation. The worst time ever, according to this prophecy. You starting to realize how bad the tribulation will be? And the Daniel 12 prophecy goes on. Then I heard the man, clothed in linen, and swore by him who lives forever, that it shall be for a time, times, and half a time. Note, this is a poetic way of saying 3.5 times, which matches the last half week of 3.5 years in the Daniel 9 70 weeks prophecy. Again, not 7 years. But let's go on. And when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all these things shall be finished. The holy people are going to be completely shattered. That describes a terrible time for God's people during the last tribulation of 3.5 years.
The tribulation is not going to be a good time to be God's people. This is where our faith is going to come in. I'll do a video trying to explain this as best I can from God's point of view, why he would have us go through such a harsh testing of our faith.
But let's go over both of these prophecies again. The Daniel 9 70 weeks prophecy ends by the wing of abominations, by the one who pours out the consummation on the desolate. This is describing the final Antichrist, who will turn on God's people and make them desolate and decimated, while the Daniel 12 prophecy similarly describes the power of the holy people being completely shattered. These are similar because they are prophesying about the same event, when God's people are overcome by the Antichrist. The Daniel 9 prophecy is structured with a final week that is cut in half, or 3.5 days. The first half was fulfilled by the ministry of Jesus Christ, while the second half week will be fulfilled by the final tribulation. And since the ministry of Jesus Christ lasted 3.5 years, that means the second half week will also last 3.5 years. Well, the Daniel 12 prophecy words this same time frame as time, times, and half a time, or 3.5 times, which matches the 3.5 years of the Daniel 9 prophecy. And if we're discussing the final tribulation, then we know this will happen in the end times. And end times are described in the book of Revelation. So we just need to match up those time periods and look for a final 3.5 year time period that describes a dark time. And we can find two examples. The first one is mentioned here within the story of the two witnesses in Revelation 11. And I will give power to my two witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 days. This time period of the two witnesses is broken down this way. The 1,260 days can be divided by a prophetic biblical year of a 360-day year, and you get 3.5 years exactly. This time period of the two witnesses is the fulfillment of the last half week in the Daniel 9 70 weeks prophecy. We'll confirm this in a second. The second time frame connection of 3.5 years comes from the first beast of Revelation in chapter 13. We find he was given authority for 42 months. I don't think we have to show the math. 42 months divided by a 12-month year also comes out to be 3.5 years. That matches the 3.5 years of the two witnesses, the 3.5 times in the Daniel 12 prophecy, and the 3.5 years of the final half week in the Daniel 9 prophecy. All of these 3.5 year time frames line up with each other perfectly. But some teachers will say there are two different 3.5 year time periods. How do we know that these time periods are describing the same events and not two different periods of time? Now we'll erase the time frames and place the context of all these connected events one by one. First, the Daniel 9 prophecy. Even until the consummation, which is determined, is poured out on the desolate. The consummation of the new covenant is poured out on the desolate. Not a good description for God's people. The Daniel 12 prophecy. When the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all these things shall be finished. Again, not a good time. The holy people are completely shattered. The two witnesses of Revelation 11. When they finish their testimony, the beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit will make war against them, overcome them, and kill them. We've been discussing who the two witnesses are, including an in-depth breakdown in our rapture video. I hope you watched it, because I'll just say, the second witness are Christians, and the beast is going to make war with Christians, overcome, and kill them. That beast mentioned here is the first beast of Revelation 13, which mentions the same event. It was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. The first beast will overcome God's saints, which matches the second witness being overcome and killed, and also matches the Daniel 12 prophecy where the holy people are completely shattered. And all of these are describing the same event, and is the fulfillment of the Daniel 9 prophecy when the consummation is poured out on the desolate. This is why the time periods match, because all of these are describing the same event. And that is the final tribulation, the last 3.5 years, and the confirmation of the new covenant in the Daniel 9 70 weeks prophecy.
Now before we start discussing why the 3.5 year time period is important, let's bring up what we mentioned earlier about the eagle and its importance as the last living creature. Again, we went over all 4 living creatures in our video about the first beast of Revelation.
In the 70 weeks prophecy, the eagle began the reign of the fourth and final living creature, ruling over God's people. The 62 weeks were fulfilled by the eagle, becoming the standard of the Roman army in 105 BC. So when General Pompey conquered Jerusalem in 63 BC, the eagle would be symbolically ruling over God's people. Then from 19 BC, King Herod refurbished the temple of God and placed an eagle over the temple of God. That began the second segment of the 7 weeks, which got us to the baptism of Jesus Christ, the start of his ministry in 30 AD. Then Jesus Christ's ministry symbolically lasted 3.5 years, the first half week of the final week, and he was put to death by Rome with its eagle symbol in 33 AD, leaving only the second half week to be fulfilled and the confirmation of the new covenant. Then in 70 AD, Rome destroyed God's temple and fulfilled this part of the prophecy. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Oh yeah, Rome did come and destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the eagle connected all these events, even through the ministry of Jesus Christ. Now let's go further. The next line has even more meaning. The end of it shall be with a flood.
Using the word flood here is another key word. We know the most famous flood in the Bible came from Noah's flood in Genesis. I suspect all people know about Noah's flood. But that flood came by God's command, and it was his attempted extermination of the line of Cain and also the Nephilim. Mankind had become so corrupted that God wanted to start over with the righteous man Noah and his family, even though sin did end up coming off the ark through Noah's son Ham. But that was God's intention, to end sin through the line of Cain and the Nephilim by a flood. If you're troubled by that, think of it this way. Only God has the power to kill. He gives life, and he can take it away too. By the way, God has promised not to flood the world again, like he did before. So that's the context of using the word flood, an attempted extermination of a people.
So how does the word flood play out here in the 70 weeks prophecy? Rome only destroyed Jerusalem and the temple in 70 AD. The Jewish people went into diaspora. They weren't exterminated, just driven out. But if you continue to track the history of the Jewish people, there was a time that they became hunted, and someone did try to exterminate them as a people. And that came during the Jewish Holocaust under the evil reign of Adolf Hitler in World War II. Yes, Hitler and his Nazis did try to exterminate an entire race of people. So this gives the fulfillment of this aspect from the 70 weeks prophecy. The end of it shall be with a flood. The Jewish people were subjected to an attempted extermination by a flood. And I'm going to prove the Holocaust was this fulfillment in Daniel 9:26. When Hitler's Germany tried to exterminate the Jewish people, they were killed under the symbol of the Nazi eagle. Wow. And once again, God's prophecy is fulfilled perfectly. The Roman eagle fulfills both destroying Jerusalem and the temple. And then Hitler attempts to finish off God's first witness, the Jewish people, with a flood under the symbol of the Nazi eagle. You have to know this interpretation is right because everything connects perfectly. And this flood is referenced in the book of Revelation, chapter 12. Now when the dragon saw that it had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. The woman here is symbolically Israel, God's first witness. She gave birth to Jesus Christ, the male child set to rule the nations. Now verse 14, but the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place. In Daniel 7, the first beast that comes out of the great sea was a lion with eagle's wings. And get this, the eagle's wings were plucked off. Notice how the woman in Revelation 12 is given 2 wings of a great eagle. That's the connection to Israel given 2 wings of the eagle. It's the first beast wings of Daniel 7. This first beast of Daniel 7, the lion, represented the first kingdom in the Bible, the kingdom of Cush, the son of Ham, who is the son of Noah. Watch these 2 videos about Nimrod and the Table of Nations. There was a lot more going on during the Tower of Babel than just the surface level of the story. Here's the rest of verse 14, where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the presence of the serpent. You should also watch this rapture video. It goes over this time frame of time and times and half a time to show you how that matched up perfectly within the story of God's first witness, the Israelites. And here we go to the reference of the flood. So the serpent spewed water out of his mouth like a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. This was fulfilled by Adolf Hitler and the Nazi eagle trying to exterminate God's first witness, the Jewish people, with a flood during the Holocaust in World War II. This matches the description in the 70 weeks prophecy in Daniel 9:26, and its reference to the same flood. Now verse 16, but the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon had spewed out of its mouth. The earth did try and help the woman, the Jewish people, by letting the nation of Israel become reborn again on May 14th, 1948. That also fulfills the resurrection of God's first witness in Revelation 11. And now, verse 17. And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring, who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Notice how the dragon moves on from the woman Israel to her offspring, those who have the testimony of Jesus Christ, the second witness of God, Christians. Now I'm going to give you the spoiler for the video about the first beast of Revelation. That first beast of Revelation will turn out to be the United States of America, who will turn on the second witness of God, Christians, and will try to kill them. And only by a divine plan of perfect symmetry would the national symbol of the United States of America also be the bald eagle. Oh, wow! And everything, once again, connects perfectly. This is why you can know this is the truth, and how the eagle symbol fulfills everything in the Daniel 9 70 weeks prophecy, which continues through in Revelation. Now let's talk about a common interpretation, and why my reading of this prophecy is different from others, why I have the tribulation as 3.5 years and not a 7-year period, and why this makes a serious difference. Let's go back to the prophecy and a typical translation. Most have the 70 weeks this way. They have the first 7 weeks and 62 weeks in order, combined as 69 weeks, and don't even know why the prophecy is segmented into 2 different parts. Then they go by this translation, and after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. Now most will say this is referring to the sacrificial death of Jesus Christ. Our Messiah, Jesus, was cut off by his death, and he didn't die for himself, but for the sins of mankind. It makes sense on the surface. So since they have verse 26 referring to Jesus Christ and his death after the 62 weeks, then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. They'll have this last week in the future, and others are going to say this is referring to the person we know as the Antichrist. And the common interpretation will cite this as 2 different 3.5-year periods, totaling a 7-year period that starts in the future, some 2,000 years after the death of Jesus Christ. Some are even saying the 7-year period starts soon. This is why you have such varied interpretations of the rapture as pre-trib, mid-trib, or post-tribulation. I believe this structure is all wrong, and I diverge from most of the other teachers on this because of the mistranslation of verse 26, which leads to misunderstanding verse 27. Now for this channel's interpretation, if you understand verse 26 this way, and after the 62 weeks the anointed one shall be cut off, but not for himself, instead of verse 26 referring to Jesus Christ, but the anointed one Cyrus, who issues the command in verse 25, then the rest of the prophecy falls into place. The 62 weeks begins at Cyrus's command and ends with Rome making the eagle its symbol. Then the 7 weeks begins with Herod placing the eagle over the temple and ends with the baptism of Jesus, the official start of his ministry. And now when we get to verse 27 and the confirmation of the covenant, the first half week is fulfilled by the ministry of Jesus until his sacrificial death, the end of all sacrifices, leaving the second half week in the future, the 3.5-year period known as the tribulation. Now if you understand the prophecy this way, there cannot be a mid-trib rapture. There's only going to be one 3.5-year time period, and the rapture can only happen either pre-trib or post-trib. This is why the understanding of this Daniel 9 70 weeks prophecy is important. There's not going to be a final 7-year period, only a final 3.5-year time period, which is described as being a terrible time, the worst time ever.
And in my video about the rapture, I cited the parallel in Exodus of the 10 plagues to show how God used the structure of the plagues to foreshadow the rapture. That video conclusively showed that the rapture will be post-trib and will only come after a 3.5-year time period of this final tribulation. Yes, I'm a post-tribber. That gets us to the second coming of Jesus Christ.
Now let's compare both of these teachings on top of each other. It's much easier when you see them both at the same time. And I'll get to show you why the common interpretation of the prophecy could be serious and maybe even fatal. Let's highlight the common interpretation. Most have Jesus' death after the 62 weeks. Some teachers don't even bother to understand why there are segments of 7 weeks and 62 weeks. They just combine them as 69 weeks total to make their dates work out. They don't even have the command to start the prophecy from verse 25 right. Whereas on this video, I've explained how the command had to have come from Cyrus, how the 62 weeks comes first, and then the 7 weeks later to get to the ministry of Jesus Christ, and noted how the eagle was the symbol that marked every segment of the prophecy. Then back here on the top about the final week, the typical interpretation has the death of Jesus, then the 2,000-year gap they'll call the church age, followed by the final week of 2 different 3.5-year time periods, totaling 7 years. On this channel, we have the ministry of Jesus Christ fulfilling the first half week until his death, then the 2,000-year gap, followed by the final half week of 3.5 years called the Tribulation. Now let's drop the first 2 segments of 69 weeks, leaving just the final week on both, to bring in verse 27 again. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. The common interpretation will say that this is supposedly referring to the Antichrist, who will confirm a covenant, then will start turning on either the Jewish people or Christians, depending on the teaching. While on this channel, I have verse 27 referring to Jesus Christ.
Now I want you to think about this critically. The Jewish people had already broken their covenant with God, sending them into exile in Babylon. That's the background before the book of Daniel. This is why God was starting a new covenant with many, which turns out to be through Christians. Now think about that common interpretation. An Antichrist would be confirming a new covenant in this prophecy of Daniel 9. Does that make sense to you? And if you read through verses 24 through 27, where does it imply that an Antichrist is even part of the prophecy? It's because it doesn't refer to the Antichrist. The Antichrist comes from the prophecy in Daniel 7, the little horn. But verse 27 of the Daniel 9 70 weeks prophecy is referring to the ministry of Jesus Christ. And now we'll get into why this is so important.
First, let's focus on the last week with the common interpretation. Those teachers will say this is referring to 2 different 3.5-year periods to confirm the covenant. This means that the Antichrist will confirm a covenant and in the middle of the week bring an end to sacrifice and offerings. And advanced teachers will bring in the book of Revelation. The prophecy time of the 2 witnesses, some say, will be during this first 3.5-year period, while the authority time of the first beast of Revelation will fulfill the second half of the final week. And I don't think there's any consensus out there on a rapture. Some say it's pre-trib, mid-trib, or even post-trib. Again, you should really watch my video on the rapture. It shows conclusively that the rapture is post-trib, preceding the second coming of Christ, and also has a detailed breakdown of who the 2 witnesses are. Many people just don't even have an understanding of who they are, and the proper understanding of who the 2 witnesses are fits perfectly into this Daniel 9 prophecy. Now we'll transition into this channel's interpretation of the final week. I believe that verse 27 is fulfilled by the ministry of Jesus. Jesus Christ would be the person to confirm a new covenant of God, and his sacrificial death did bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and that leaves the second half week still to be fulfilled. I believe the following things of Revelation will happen during this time. This will be the authority time of the first beast of Revelation. This coincides and happens at the same time as the second witness of Revelation. I did refer to this as the second witness. If you watch that rapture video, the time of the first witness has already been fulfilled, leaving only the second witness of God, Christians, to fulfill Revelation 11. This 3.5-year period will be the time that the real Antichrist takes control of the first beast, establishing his dominance of the world and the persecution of God's people. This will match those terrible times described in the book of Daniel.
You may have noticed that I called him the real Antichrist. I'm going to say something controversial here. I want you to think like Satan. He knows his time is short and this will not end well for him. Do you think he'll be satisfied taking down just non-believers? I don't. I think he'll be coming after Christians, just like Revelation 12 says he will come after us. And besides God, who do you think knows the Bible prophecies most? Satan does, more than me or any other teacher out there. So he's going to try and deceive you any way he can to get you to condemn yourself. No, I'm not a Calvinist student. Once saved, always saved does not sound true from my reading of the Bible. I do think Satan can deceive Christians to follow him down the path of destruction. The Apostle Paul talks about a final strong delusion leading many to perish. I believe that Satan is going to infiltrate Christianity itself. That's right, the Antichrist will first claim to be a Christian. And the last great deception from Satan is going to pit the sects of Christianity against themselves. Now I know that may sound crazy, but watch how this plays out. Let's go back to the last slide.
Look at the common interpretation up here. Lots of people think that verse 27 from this Daniel 9 prophecy means that the Antichrist will confirm a covenant and he will somehow end sacrifices at the end of a first 3.5 year period. But if verse 27 has already been fulfilled by Jesus, wouldn't it make sense for Satan to possess someone, setting them up as a false Antichrist? I think this is exactly how it will play out. There's going to be a false Antichrist setup. Someone is going to assume the role of the Antichrist. He will seemingly fulfill this prophecy and make you think he's the guy, only to be part of the deception by Satan. This is not exactly a false flag operation. The false Antichrist will probably be evil himself. He'll be possessed by Satan, but he'll only be half of the equation. Satan can occupy both sides of a fight, only exposing one half, and you'll think you'll be supporting the fight against evil, which you are, but only later come to realize the side that you've supported was evil too. I will do a video sometime next year showing this has happened before in the Bible. This is why the next step of the common interpretation is part of the deception. Some will say that this period will be the time of the two witnesses, when someone will be claiming to be doing God's work, standing against and eventually killing the false Antichrist. But this person will be the real Antichrist, a false prophet of God. This is why the book of Revelation calls the beast, the Antichrist, a false prophet. And for those wise in the scriptures, you'll know he's the guy, because he'll be controlling the world, even though he'll appear to be a good guy. This will be a strong delusion that the Apostle Paul talked about in his letter to the Thessalonians.
This is going to be Satan's last great deception in the world, and it's meant to trip up, deceive Christians, and take them down with him. He's going to pit the sects of Christianity against each other. Do you think that's too far-fetched? I don't. When I came to Christ, I got involved with debates about doctrine between Protestants, Catholics, and Orthodox Christians. The fighting between the sides are downright nasty sometimes. And after a while, I started to realize I didn't see Christ on either side of the debates. And it would only take a little nudge from an evil Antichrist to start killing one sect, call them the synagogue of Satan, and the people on his side could support the Antichrist unwittingly. The gospel of Jesus is about love. And that's why I've stressed that I'm an ecumenical guy. Anyone that says that Jesus Christ is our Lord and Savior is my brother and sister in Christ. Period. I'm going to let Jesus sort out the bad doctrine between the sects. We're supposed to be in this together. And that's how I'm approaching the end times. So when the real Antichrist turns on one sect of Christianity and says they are the synagogue of Satan, I'll know he's the Antichrist when he starts killing in God's name. The opposite of what Jesus did 2,000 years ago. Remember that when one side of the sect starts the killing, he'll be the Antichrist, no matter if he's killing people with bad doctrine from a church different than yours. And when he starts rounding up my brothers and sisters in Christ, then I'll be the one helping the oppressed and persecuted people of God. Do you want to see support for this conflict between the different sects of Christianity?
Read the description of the end times from Jesus himself in the Gospels. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another. See that? Betrayal and hatred of one another. Now the Gospel of Luke. But before all these things, they will lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and prisons. You will be brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. You will be betrayed even by parents and brothers, relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death, and you will be hated by all for my name's sake. persecution, betrayal by parents, brothers, relatives, and friends, even until death. Now Mark's Gospel. But watch out for yourselves, for they will deliver you up to consuls, and you will be beaten in the synagogues. You'll be brought before rulers and kings for my sake, for a testimony to them. Now brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child, and children will rise up against parents and cause them to be put to death. And you will be hated by all for my name's sake, but he who endures to the end shall be saved. Mark reinforces the same thing, betrayal within families even until death, which matches the dark theme of terrible times prophesied in the book of Daniel.
Do you think this is just about families breaking down, this betrayal within the family structure? I think this reinforces the conflict will come within the family of God, between the different sects of Christianity. Brothers and sisters in Christ we are supposed to be. The killing all started with Cain murdering his brother Abel, continued with Jesus being betrayed by a brother, and it will end with brothers in Christ turning on each other. And the sect which gets targeted and killed first will be God's people. And the sect doing the betraying and killing will be deceived by the Antichrist, the false prophet pretending to be doing God's work.
Jesus summarizes this terrible time in Matthew 24. For then there will be great tribulation, such as not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be.
This is not going to be a good time to be God's people. This will parallel the Jewish people in Germany during the Holocaust, and God's people are going to turn on each other. There's not going to be a pre-trib rapture to save the elect from the tribulation. All the prophecies from Daniel talk about horrible end times. The book of Revelation matches the time of the two witnesses to the first beast of Revelation. And the 70 weeks prophecy in Daniel 9 also talks about desolation. Everything matches up. And this is why those saying there will be a 7-year period could lead you into possible fatal error. When the 3.5 years of final tribulation occurs, many will sit back and see their brothers and sisters in Christ be killed by the Antichrist, falsely thinking they are the synagogue of Satan. They think they'll be saved by holding out for a future period of 3.5 years, watching their brothers die. And when the only remaining 3.5 year period does come, they'll be surprised to see Jesus Christ come early.
Read this from Matthew. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. Remember, the Daniel 9 70 weeks prophecy was the covenant through Jesus Christ with many. The love of many will grow cold. This is why this is so important and why I'm ecumenical between the sects of Christianity. Jesus said in John's Gospel, people will know us as disciples by how we love each other. In this final half week, the 3.5 years of tribulation will be the completion of the 70 weeks prophecy in Daniel 9.
Now let's get into why the tribulation is 3.5 years. Just because God set up the structure of the week to be 7 days in his creation and then cut it in half between Jesus and his followers is just scratching the surface. There's something much deeper to understanding what is going on here. I went over this in a couple videos. I believe in the dual symbolic telling of the stories. So when God created the stars on day 4 of creation, and the Bible tells us that stars are symbolic of angels, then day 4 of creation is when God created the angels. So if God created the angels on day 4, then creation day 4 would be useful in knowing what the angels were supposed to do.
And I will highlight the first part of the angel's function here. Then God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons, and for days and years. The lights in the sky were used for time measurement. We know this is true, as the moon was used to bring in new months, and the sun to measure days and years. So time measurement being connected to angels is a real thing. We know it is because within Daniel 7 and the description of the fourth terrible beast, it says this, after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. And there, in this horn, were the eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. This fourth terrible beast in Daniel 7 is the first beast of Revelation 13, because they both have the same 10 horns. But then note this, there's a little horn, who's known infamously as the Antichrist. And later in the chapter, it says this, the 10 horns are 10 kings who shall arise from this kingdom, and another shall rise after them. He shall be different from the first ones, and shall subdue 3 kings. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time and times and half a time. First, notice the last 2 lines, how the saints will be given into his hand for a time and times and half a time. Again, reinforcing the final 3.5-year time period of the tribulation, coming from the little horn, who we know as the Antichrist, as he takes power over the saints. But let's highlight this part, and shall intend to change times and law. That's an important concept, and brings us back to the function of the angels on creation day 4. And let them be for signs and seasons, and for days and years. If the angels' function was connected to time measurement, then the Antichrist trying to change the times has a lot of deeper meaning in the last rebellion by Satan.
And we know this is part of the battle between God and Satan, the changing of times, because just look at our modern calendar. The Gregorian calendar modified the Julian calendar, but both of those solar-based calendars were adopted widely by the world because they coincided with the birth of Jesus Christ. Time had changed because of Jesus Christ. God was definitely making a statement here to Satan. So in return, Satan in some way will try and change time again at the end. That will be a sign of the Antichrist. Someone who tries to change the times of something. How that gets fulfilled, I don't know, but it's something to look for. But we can go even deeper here. I've been producing videos which explain biblical prophecies that use a 360-day year. But we all know our modern calendar is measured by a 365.25-day year, if you account for the leap year. So if God's prophecies are fulfilled by a 360-day year, that means that God originally intended for a year to be measured by 360 days per year. But when did time change from the 360 days to the 365.25 days per year? I was trying to work out this wacky theory that sin had not only created a spiritual distance between man and God, but that also caused the Earth to move slightly farther in its orbit, which caused the extra time for the Earth to orbit around the Sun. I'll give a shout out to a commenter on one of my videos that cited Dr. Walt Brown's hydroplate theory. That theory generally states that the Great Flood of Noah was the cause for time to change from a 360-day year to our modern time, a 365.25-day year. I think there's a lot of merit to that theory. I'm not a scientist in any way, but I do believe in Pangea, that originally that the Earth had one supercontinent, and at some point that continent separated into what we know as the 7 continents.
I also believe that the great city of Babylon is Earth. So when Revelation describes Babylon as having 7 heads, which are 7 mountains, that means the 7 continents of the earth would fulfill that perfectly. And it also fits that the great flood of Noah would be the catalytic cause to move the 7 continents into their present place. A flood of that magnitude, with waters bursting forth from above and below, could be the reason why the land masses of earth would separate.
And I hope I'm not butchering Dr. Brown's theory, but a combination of the decreasing in the Earth's crust with now 7 large land masses moving around the Earth is what caused the Earth to now orbit around the Sun for 365.25 days instead of 360 days, an extra 5.25 days. Theologically, it changes my theory that instead of time changing from the original sin, it changed at the time of Noah and the flood. I'm definitely now embracing that theory. I will get into it more when I discuss the Nephilim in the future. But just because this is an out there theory and not provable does not mean things cannot be known as truths from a Christian perspective.
We know biblical prophecy is based on a 360-day year, so we can say with relative confidence that God's original intention was to have a 360-day year. That's how the world began. And we know that our modern calendar is based on a 365.25-day year. So the difference between God's original time and modern time is 5.25 days. So why is that 5.25-day difference significant? And how does this fit into this video about the coming tribulation? Remember, most of Daniel's prophecies are pointing to this 3.5-year final time period we know as the tribulation. Daniel 7 cites it, then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time and times and half a time. Also, Daniel 9 and its determination of a final week. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. The middle of the week would mark the beginning of the last half week of 3.5 days. And even Daniel 12 cites the same time period, that it shall be for a time, times, and half a time. And when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all these things shall be finished. Let's reconfigure the slide and all 3 of these prophecies to show how they all point to this 3.5-year time period. These 3.5-year time periods match up perfectly with the book of Revelation, the 2 witnesses. And I will give power to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. I did this earlier. The time period is converted using that 360-day year, taking the 1,260 days and dividing it by a 360-day prophetic year, and coming up with 3.5 years exactly, which is also the same time period for the first beast of Revelation. And he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. If you take 42 months and divide it by 12 months to a year, you get those 3.5 years. So all these different prophecies are all pointing to a final 3.5-year time period, or what we know as the final tribulation. And the context of all these prophecies are all pointing to the saints being overcome and killed. Immense suffering for the people of God, because that's what tribulation means. But why is this important between the time changing from the 360-day year to the 365.25-day year, that 5.25-day difference? And how does it relate to the final tribulation of 3.5 years? This lesson becomes a simple math equation. The reason why there's immense suffering in the tribulation for a total of 3.5 years is when you take the number 3.5 and divide it by that number 5.25, you get 666. Unbelievable! That's the number of the mark of the beast, folks. And that's why the final tribulation will be 3.5 years. It's the time of the mark of the beast having final power over God's people. Those 3.5 years is exactly 2/3 of the time in the difference between God's original time of 360 days and the time changing to 365.25 days. Those 5.25 days. That's why all these prophecies were pointing to this 3.5-year time period. There's so much more deeper meaning to these numbers than just the surface level. Even the time period of the tribulation matches up with the number from the mark of the beast, which confirms the tribulation will be 3.5 years, the reign of the final Antichrist.
When we get into the connections of the Antichrist, that 5.25-day difference will also show you how it was paralleled many times in the Bible in different ways. God is so amazing to keep using these same numbers and time periods in the stories. You'll see that in future videos.
Now we have to finally talk about one of the aspects of this fulfilled prophecy, and they're the gaps. If you noticed in the fulfillment segments between the 62 weeks at 105 BC and the 7 weeks in 19 BC, there's a gap of 86 years. Then in the final week between the death of Jesus Christ at 33 AD, indicating the end of the first half week of the final week, and the beginning of the last half week we know as the tribulation, there's a gap of 2,000 years in there as well. I think I have answers for those, and these gaps in the prophecies do not bother me. I mentioned this earlier, the common interpretation and their 7-year tribulation also have a gap. Theirs comes between the 69 weeks and the last week. It doesn't matter where you put the 2,000-year gap. It's obviously there, no matter what. But I do have deeper meanings for the gaps between the segments in my fulfillment, as I drop off the last half week in the future. I said earlier that the time between 105 BC, the starting of the eagle symbol, and when the Jewish temple was destroyed in 70 AD was 175 years. That time period matched the lifetime that Abraham lived. We all know the significance of Abraham, or rather most Christians should know his significance. And like I said, there's beautiful symmetry between God choosing Abraham to start his first people and him living 175 years, which matches up perfectly with a final 175 years between the eagle becoming the symbol and then the eagle destroying the temple of God's first people. So if these are bookend time periods orchestrated by God's will, then the gaps in this section should have related meaning to Abraham as well. And you can find a match for the first 86-year gap in Genesis 16. When Hagar the Egyptian gives birth to Ishmael, Abram was 86 years old. This is Abraham before he receives his new name in the next chapter.
If you study Genesis, you know this was not God's plan for Abraham to have a child with his wife's servant. Sarah, Abraham's wife, convinced Abraham to have a child by the servant. Abraham listened to his wife instead of what God had promised him in the previous chapter. Abraham didn't have faith that God would provide children within the confines of his marriage with Sarah. This context, listening to his wife instead of God, reminds me of the story in the Garden of Eden, when Adam also took a bite from the forbidden fruit because he listened to Eve instead of God. A remarkable parallel if you compare these events.
But the fact that Ishmael was born when Abraham was 86 years old gives this first 86-year gap a lot of meaning. Taken from the life of Abraham, the beginning of God's people, matched to another 86-year period at the end of God's people. Now let's look at another gap. It's right here between the death of Jesus Christ and the Jewish temple being destroyed. Many Christians, including myself, believe that Jesus died in 33 AD. I've supported that date in my videos, and all historians know that the Jewish temple was destroyed in 70 AD. That's a 37-year gap. Remember, the time from 105 BC until the temple being destroyed matched the lifetime of Abraham. And then the first gap of 86 years was how old Abraham was when he listened to his wife and had a child out of his marriage, against God's plan. So for these gaps to have special meaning, we should see something else significant in the life of Abraham that also matches those 37 years. Indeed, there is. That 37-year time period does show up in the story of Abraham, but you'll have to go deeper to find it. And since the first gap represented Ishmael, the child born out of his marriage union, then maybe the second gap of 37 years will have to do with the child of promise, Isaac. Yes, sirree, it certainly does. We know how old Abraham was when Isaac was born. Now, Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Abraham was 100 years old, and we can also know how old his wife Sarah was as well. We find that information back in Genesis 17, when God was promising Abraham that Sarah would have a child in her old age. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said in his heart, "Shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child?" So Abraham states clearly that he will be 100 years old when Isaac will be born, and Sarah, his wife, will be 90 years old, an age difference of 10 years. So if Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born, that means that Sarah was in fact 90 years old when Isaac was born. Pretty straightforward. And since Isaac is the child of promise, that marking point would be significant. Then we can go to the end of the story of Sarah, her death in Genesis 23. Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. So Sarah died in Kirjath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. Sarah gave birth to Isaac at 90 years old and died at 127. That means it was 37 years from the birth of the promised child Isaac until Sarah's death and burial in the cave in Hebron. You know where this is going, but wait until you hear the context. This is the same time frame from the death and resurrection of the promised Son Jesus Christ, 37 years until the destruction of the temple of God. And in the Bible, Israel was referred to as God's first wife. So you could also say the destruction of Israel's temple was the entombment of God's first wife, completely matching the 37-year time period from the birth of Isaac, the promised son, to the entombment of Sarah, Abraham's first wife. Man, this is so perfect. So you can see how the gaps of 86 years and the 37 years have a lot of deeper meaning taken from the story of Abraham, the start of God's chosen people, until the time of the end of God's people, from the beginning of the fourth living creature, the eagle,
until the destruction of the temple. Do you think these ages matching up within the story of Abraham and the gaps in the prophecy are a coincidence? I'll stand behind this prophecy fulfillment with the gaps in it because everything has meaning behind it and it all connects perfectly. Now we have to talk about the final gap in the last week of the prophecy, the 2,000-year gap. I believe that verse 27 is speaking about the new covenant between Jesus and his people, Christians, and the ministry of Jesus Christ, symbolically lasting 3.5 years, fulfills the first half week of the prophecy. And we just have to fulfill the last half week of the prophecy. That has not happened yet. And if Jesus died in 33 AD, then from that time until now has been 2,000 years. It's quite a gap. And note this, most teachings on the 70 weeks prophecy also have the same 2,000-year gap. It's just a matter of where you put it. But this 2,000-year gap is explained in the story of Lazarus. Yep, the story of Jesus Christ raising his friend back from the dead. Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary who anointed the Lord with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore the sister sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, This sickness is not to death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Then after this he said to the disciples, Let us go to Judea again. Lazarus is sick, but the story goes on from here. These things he said, and after that he said to them, Our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him up. Then his disciples said, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get well. However, Jesus spoke of his death, but they thought that he was speaking about taking rest and sleep. Then Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him. Okay, it's clear at some point Lazarus died, and Jesus knew he was dead. Let's keep going. So when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had joined the women around Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary was sitting in the house. Now Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, Your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And he who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who has come into the world. Now let's skip down to when Jesus goes to the tomb. Then Jesus, again groaning in himself, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, Take away the stone. Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, Lord, by this time there is a stench, for he has been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, Did I not say to you, that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God? Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was lying. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me, and I know that you will always hear me. But because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me. Now when he had said these things, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he who had died came out bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, Loose him and let him go. I hope you all believe that this literally happened. I do. Jesus showed all of us that he had power over death. Through our faith in Jesus Christ, there will be life after death. That's a plain statement of faith from every single Christian in the world. And this is going to be essential to us in the end times as well. Besides the miracle of Jesus raising Lazarus back from the dead, how could this story have meaning in the Daniel 9 prophecy? First this, Jesus said, Take away the stone. Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, Lord, by this time there is a stench, for he has been dead 4 days. Lazarus was dead for 4 days total. But let's go back to the beginning.
Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, so when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. So when Jesus heard about Lazarus, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Let's remember why in the previous verse. When Jesus heard that, he said, "This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Lazarus died in order for the Son of God, Jesus Christ, to be glorified through the raising of Lazarus back from the dead, so people would believe that Jesus had power over death. And Jesus waited 2 more days in the place where he was in order to show his glory at defeating death. Can you see where I'm going with this? Jesus Christ died in 33 AD, and it's been about 2,000 years since his death. We know that time is different for God. But beloved, do not forget this one thing, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as 1 day. If 1,000 years is a day to God, and it's been 2,000 years since his death, then to God it's been about 2 days since the death of Jesus Christ. And if he arrives soon, he will have waited 2 days in the place where he was, in order for the Son of God to be glorified by the raising the dead back to life. That's beautiful. And now you know why Jesus waited 2 days before going to Lazarus, and why there's a 2,000-year gap between the first half week and the last half week of the final week in the 70 weeks prophecy. He waited 2 more days in the place where he was for the glory of Jesus Christ after the 3.5-year tribulation and the resurrection of God's second witness Christians. This parallel connection is just sublime. Amen. Jesus Christ is coming soon. Maranatha.
There's a video coming about the suffering and desolation of the tribulation, so we'll try to explain why God would test us by enduring suffering in order for us to live eternally. It will speak in broad terms of our faith in God. I hope you've been watching my videos. I'll be touching on many of them. Also, another video will be coming about the 144,000 in Revelation, who they are, or better yet, what concept they represent. And I will even bring up new connections like Daniel and the lion, how that will be fulfilled in the future, who the Nicolaitans are in the book of Revelation, and the last hour of trial, and its connection to the number 40. We are starting a period called the beginning of sorrows. The world is going to start changing rapidly. Be prepared for it. Watch my videos, especially the ones since last year having to do with end times. I will try and help everyone along the way to navigate the coming tribulation, the final test of our faith by God, because now you know how the Daniel 9 70 weeks prophecy is fulfilled and how long the tribulation will be. 3.5 years. These 3.5 years will be the confirmation of the new covenant with God through Jesus Christ. Keep reading the Gospels. Those stories are your lifeline for the tribulation. Repent and accept the grace offered by our Redeemer, Jesus Christ. He's already defeated the first death. We just have to have faith in Jesus to defeat the second death. And may God bless you all.